A wonderful day to you all listeners. You're welcome to the Thoughts TV podcast show that we actually have on the weekends. And today we'll be looking at the legacy of colonialism in Africa and how it has actually affected the African continent. So here with me is one of our wonderful, a great speaker, not just a speaker, but a philosopher also, in the name of Shedrack and Benson Dre. I call him Triple B. That is a man with triple brains. So you're welcome once again to the show.
It's nice
to have you around. You're welcome. So like I earlier said, we'll be looking at the effects of colonialism in Africa. We have to actually know that colonial power have actually extracted economic systems in Africa that continues to shape the continents through incultured structure and dependency on raw materials that also cause political instability. And before then, we also like to let the people know that before colonialism started, it started from a root, which is what? Slavery. So today we'll actually be talking about slavery, colonialism, neocolonialism, then the main topic, which is what? The legacy of colonialism in Africa and how it has affected the African continent, not only the African continent, but the African mentality. And afterward, we'll also talk about the limitations of the problem that we are having in the African continent. And finally, before we cap it off for the day, we'll talk about the ways of which we can break through and go out from those colonialism.
Well, it's good we are bringing this topic again because Africa as a continent has been cheated, and which is not fair, because from beginning of time, like he said, from slavery, we should go into slavery, if we should go into history rather, and there's no way we can discuss slavery without talking about this, because the problem we have in Africa today started with religion. It's not just one particular religion, but everything in general, because Africa is the only continent that did not force itself on that continent. Whatever we have here today is being given to us, not by we, but by force. And what gave birth to colonialism? Slave.
First up, bro.
It's all about the slave trade from the Portuguese missionaries on the Arab nation and all that. But I think slavery is a topic on its own, and I believe it should be a topic for another day.
Definitely, that's my point. Because slavery is actually going to be a different topic on its own. But today we'll actually be throwing more light on the legacy of colonialism in Africa. How it has affected the African continent. I just want you to throw more light on this particular thing, because I've actually been hearing it over a couple of times, whereby some people will just sit on the beach and they tell me, sometimes if I was even opportune to be in a particular seminar where they were actually talking about the impartation of colonialism in Africa. That was what gave rise to this particular statement by a man that came from the stage. When he said this particular statement, I pinpointed it and I jotted it down. And I said, I'm going to have a clearer clarification from a man that has high intellectual, just have you, because you are a man with triple brains. So now, take me back to the question. Africa, they export what they don't consume. And at the same time, Africans, they consume what they don't produce. For instance now, taking the case study of cocoa. We have cocoa in abundance in Africa. For instance now, in Nigeria, we have a great deposit of cocoa. Not only in Nigeria, in Zimbabwe, we also have a great deposit of cocoa. But you get to notice that the colonialism has come to our country, taking our mineral resources, the likes of cocoa, likes of oil, the likes of gold, the likes of diamond, the likes of copper, and they take it outside the country.
Okay.
Then, when they bring it back to Nigeria, importing it, they are now process that cocoa into what they call coffee. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes. And the thing is, Ghana is the highest producer of cocoa in Africa. And if you look at Africa today, I don't think we have a single company that produce coffee. But we have the raw material. And if you look at Democratic Republic of Congo, their mineral resources worth about $24 trillion.
That's amazing.
They produce 30% of cobalt in the world. And this thing is used for all these electronics. But we do not have a single company
that produces too bad.
So our resources have been exported, being reproduced into something else, and they bring it back to us, and we are paying heavily for it. And the problem started with decolonization. During the process of decolonizing Africa, we lack unity. The problem of Africa is decolonizing Africa without unity. Because if there's unity, the problem we have today, we won't be having it.
Very true.
And that was during the first African Union Conference in Ethiopia in 1963. The greatest speech in that conference was made by the Ghanaian activist, revolutionist, Kwame Nkrumah. And in his speech, he listed out 5 agendas. And those 5 agendas portrays unity. That we cannot live here without this agenda. If we leave this place without these 5 things, there will be a problem. And today, the result of what that man said in reality is all that face. One is having a central currency. In Africa today, we have 33 currency.
Very true.
That are valueless. 33 currency that you cannot use to trade within Africa.
So in other words, before you continue, you are trying to say now that the affecting of the mental ability, or sorry to say, let me rephrase that statement. The legacy of colonialism in Africa now, from what you are saying, has affected what? The monetary policy.
Yes. Like I was saying, Kwame Nkrumah said, and I quote, "We cannot leave this meeting today without having a central currency, a central military system, that is one army in Africa, the African continent, to have one military system. Not that Nigeria is having Nigerian army, the Ghanaian army, and all these things. Central military system. One currency, one government. That is unity. That we should come together as one. That is the only way we can defeat the colonists. And in his words, he said, if we do not take action, the colonists will be back. And today, they are back.
They are back. In the form of new colonization.
To surprise you, the colonists never left. And that was why the Osai Jofo said in one of his book, which he titled Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism. Because what we are having today, We are still dependent on the Western world. We are still dependent on the Europeans. They are taking from us. In fact, let me say this, that what France is today, yes, started from Africa. What Belgium is today started from Africa. What Britain is today started from Africa. In fact, France is the most greedy among all the 7 countries, or let me say 7 nations that colonized
Africa.
Burkina Faso, yes. Mali, Yarabia,
Chad. Yeah,
Ino, so when they came as an humanist to help us,
to bring development.
But indirectly, they are extracting our resources. See, King Leopold II claimed Democratic Republic of Congo without stepping his footsteps. He had never been in Democratic Republic of Congo, but he claimed it. So himself, he named it Free Trade Zone. And the development they were bringing to Africa is to benefit themselves. Example, the first thing they did is to build railways. And what was the purpose of the railway? For transportation.
And unknowingly to the Africans, their thought was they have started bringing development into their own continent.
And those people that noticed it earlier, that these people, what they are doing is to benefit themselves. What happened to them? They are being assassinated.
Wow.
See, if you look at, I use Congo as examples, and because they are the richest African nation when it comes to resources, mineral resources, and the Belgium colonized Congo, and they took everything that belongs to them. And if you remember, King Leopold committed an Holocaust, killing about 10 to 15 million Congolese. Because the rebel against his activities. And you will remember the popular man, Patrice M.
Lumumba.
Lumumba was an activist who saw that what the Belgians were doing in Congo is unjust. And he stood up that no, this guy. And you know what it? He was assassinated. And they took his body and they soaked in acid so that his grave can be unknown to the Congolese, to avoid protests, resistance from the Congolese. And 61 years in 2022, they returned his golden tooth. One of his golden tooth was returned in 2022 and it was buried. They returned it to his family. And if you should be taking Africa one by one, our own country, Nigeria, in December 1963, Nigeria was represented by the Alhaji Tafawa Balewa. And he said, that what we need in Africa now to be able to conquer these things is unity. We need to come together. And what we don't know is that if Nigeria is free, Africa is free.
Most definitely.
And that brings me to the word of the same man, Nkrumah, in 1957, during Ghana independence. Ghana is the first sub-Saharan country in Africa to gain independence. So after his first speech, he said, "The freedom of Ghana is nothing if the rest of Africa is not free. And with the freedom of Ghana, everybody sat and begin to think of how the rest of Africa will be free." And 5 years later, 33 countries gain independence. That is progress. But there is this saying that we are weak. We are not. It's because we have leaders that are selfish. Focus is not weak.
Hold on. Now, you have said something of which I actually pinpointed. Now, you said Africa as a continent, we are not.
We are not.
It is because of what? The leaders who are actually what? Selfish. So now, from what you are saying now, selfish is also synonymous with corruption.
Yes.
That simply means that is a limitation of what we are facing in Africa.
Yes. And this, when we talk about selfishness, we have leaders that only want to enrich their pockets. And when you look at Burkina Faso, when you look at Mali, when you look at Tanzania, when you look at Congo, when you look at Zimbabwe, when you look at Ghana, when you look at Nigeria, these people have had leaders that are selfless. If you look at Burkina Faso, you will remember this man, I've forgotten his name, Thomas Sankara. He was a leader that fought for his country, that was ready to develop his country. But because the colonists are still alive, he was assassinated by his old friend, who later ruled Burkina Faso, I think 24 to 37 years.
One man.
Yes, doing nothing. If you remember Robert Mugabe, who used to be a good man, but with the influence of the West, he became a monster. And he ruled Zimbabwe for many years. You will remember Jomo Kenyatta, you will remember Julius Nyerere. The thing is, about these people is, when you go against their way, you get assassinated.
And nobody gets.
And if you remember, I think it was in 1958 or 1953, Amilcar Cabral of Guinea-Bissau, he stood against, I think it was the Portuguese. They killed this man, and that was the end of colonialism in Guinea-Bissau. Because 1 year after, again, the death of Cabral
Give rights.
to Guinea-Bissau. They are the people. We are not weak. It's just that the kind of leaders we have in Africa now are selfish. Now,
I'm sorry to cut you short. I can see that you are actually very, very good with histories, because you are giving us some records that are actually, as in, they are enormous. Now, I want to take us now back to modern Africa, because now I see you are progressing further from the inception of colonialism down to the modern Africa. Now, in modern Africa, a continent that happens to be the second largest continent of the world, and a continent that is tagged very rich, yet so poor. What are the things that have actually gave rise to this poor nature that we are having in this economy or the continent at large? For instance, now, is it that the dependence of raw materials has affected us and has affected our mental health to the extent that we tend to put all our hopes on raw materials, the likes of gold, the likes of oil, without diversifying into other things? At least I just want to know.
Let's look at Nigeria. We have gold.
Okay.
We have edicts, there's iron, there's wool, there is this, there's that. We have it up to oil. It's for, and we need to commodify our money. Because before the discovery of crude oil, there was, isn't it?
Positive.
Now, because we discover crude oil, we abandon
Cocoa.
And the combination of these two will have been a plus to the development of young Sasha. Not just that, we have, and our major focus is on crude, whereas we have all the resources. We have all the resources, and the thing is that we are so much dependent on
Raw material.
on not even raw material. Can you imagine Nigeria, that is among top 5 oil producing nations in the world, does not have a refinery?
Too bad. So for what you are saying now, the dependence of foreign economy has also affected us.
Yes. Because, okay, let's look at currency, for example. Everything we are trading in Nigeria is in dollar. Likewise, other African countries. And as of today, the trade between African countries is just 15%. If I produce something in Ghana, maybe I produce an air conditioner in Ghana, and another company produce the same air conditioner in PT. Which one would that?
I tend to go for the one in Italy.
Why?
Because it has affected my mentality already.
That the
one in Italy is original and more genuine as compared to the one in Africa.
But we are using the same pattern, the same design, the same company. What gives you the assurance that the one produced in Africa is fake?
It has actually affected our mental health.
That is the problem. If I produce a drug in, let me see, Tanzania, and an Indian man produces the same drug, we might go to patronize India too.
Was definitely
Because there is this mentality. The Europeans has eaten deep into our mentality
super
that makes us feel that whatever that
inferior
from Africa cannot be good. But the materials in which they are using to make all these things is
from Africa.
So if you cannot patronize Africa, if we do not patronize Africa, we are going to remain steady. And it is quite so painful sometimes when I remember that a group of people sat together and begin to claim African countries. Oh, I want this. No, yeah, I want this. I want this. I want this. It is painful.
I believe you are talking about the Berlin Conference that was held in 1884.
1884 Berlin Conference is the beginning of African dam. Though colonialism had been existed before 1884, but there was chaos between themselves. Like, okay, there was this thing that, okay, you are encroaching my territory. You're encroaching my territory. And in 1884, they sat together and they begin to divide Africa. That you take Nigeria, you take Zimbabwe, you take Tanzania, and like that. And they begin the extraction. Like this time around, they have legal ground to extract anything from Africa.
Back to what I was saying earlier on. I can see that you are actually very, very good with histories. And not only histories, you are good with records. It comes up to you. Yes, the African man. So, from what you've been saying earlier on, I have gotten to pinpoint some of the key things you said and how the legacy of colonialism in Africa as a continent has affected the African mentality. And from the little things I actually pinpointed, you talked about what? The dependence in what? Raw materials. That is, you are having total dependence in raw materials. For instance, cocoa. For instance, oil. And secondly, we talked about the dependence in what? Foreign countries. In other words, without the help of the foreign countries coming into your country to come and take habitat over you, you are as good as nothing. Then thirdly, unequal trade policies. Where that was why I said Africans tend to consume or tend to export what they don't actually consume, but they consume what
the thing is produce. What we should consume, we are exporting it. We are importing what we do not eat. The things that we need in this country, okay, like we said the other time, we have it as many as possible in African countries. Can't we have a factory here in Africa? We have genius in Africa. We have one of the best doctors in the world. They are Africans. So we need to come back home. And we need to re-strategize. That is why I do not see the importance of the African Union. They're not doing it. Because they are the ones that are supposed to unite us. That is the purpose. That is the foundation of the organization. Unity. And as we are now, it will be difficult for Africa to be united. Because the Western world are taking ground. We need look at Burkina Faso. Yeah, we're sending France away. We're bringing in Russia,
another foreign country. Now, hold on. From what I have actually read, I get to see that colonialism is actually a practice whereby a country or a foreign country which has a higher development tend to come to a country with a low development, for instance, African continent as an example, and they take total control. They make that particular entity their own sovereign entity, whereby they have coercive control of powers over them.
The thing is, they came with the intention that we thought they are coming to help us. We thought they are going to develop us. So they gave us goods. They gave us education. I have problems with that. See, I was speaking with somebody recently and he said we should be grateful that in Africa today, some of us can speak English, we can speak history. I said that is not true. That is not true. Before colonialism, there's nothing like this place is Ghana, this place is Tanzania, this place is, there's no division. We're identified by empire and kingdom. So you understand? That's how in South Africa we have the Zulu Empire, in Ethiopia, in Nigeria we have the Benin, the Benin the Dame Empire, like that. But when these people came, they scatter. They made us believe that what we have, our culture, is not good. It gave us their culture. Whatever you are today, your discipline is computer science. Because when they brought this, they took some of us outside. Then I call it his education.
Not education.
Not education. I was reading one of the book by, I think, was a number called Scavy. And the title of the book is His Education of the Negroes. Well, he is educated. We call it education, but I call it miseducation. Because I am talking to you now, I am speaking in English. It's a good thing. He talks. Isn't it? Or when you go to China, you don't speak English.
Not at all.
Before you travel,
You must learn their language.
before coming to Africa, you should have the knowledge of a language.
So in other words, they have actually affected our mentality, making us feel inferior.
Yes, now, making us feel that what they give us, school food, no, not totally bad. You understand? Not totally bad. Because when it comes to infrastructure, we have roads, we have hospitals, they open our eyes.
So in other words, you are just trying to tell us that it's actually a touch of positivity with a whole lot of negativities.
English, they feel like, oh, it has delegated for fire. But no, that person that they return back, they return that person back for their own
benefits.
without their doing it, will persuade. Mostly for the purpose of this transformation. You get it?
Yes, I understand.
So now this thing is having negative effect on us. That is why we see outside country as escape route from problems.
Formats. A place where we can actually have greener pasture.
Without it greener. But yeah, it's greener. But the problem is there is no unity. The people in charge. See that because the problem of Africa is bad.
Good. Now, you talked about that. Without wasting much time, from the conversation that we are having, viewers, you can actually get to see that we have actually talked about the main focus we're actually focusing on today, which is what? The legacy of colonialism in Africa and how it has what? Affected our mentality, which gave rise also to the introduction, a little bit of introduction about slavery. Not only slavery, we therefore expatiated on the explanation of what? Colonialism and how it has affected our mentality. And afterwards, he also went to what? Neocolonialism. Sir, please, I want to ask you, before we cap it up for today, what are the ways you can feel that we can actually have a breakthrough to actually overcome this mentality that we are having now?
Well, the total breakthrough is to act in general, limiting the impact of the West in our problem.
Limiting the impact of the West in our governments.
Can you imagine during the 2023 general election and they were observers, the whites, the MC, as observing our election to say that, oh, this is a free and fair election. So they will not give the final say over our own election. So we have to limit the impact of Western activities in now I take Traore as an example. Is developing immediately he cut off flats. There is rapid development in Burkina Faso. Look at Chad. Look at Mali. See, I put it to you that Africa needs revolution.
A great revolution at that.
See, the only people that can revive Africa are the people that have interest of Africa in it. In fact, we are beginning to have people opposed in the present generation. We are beginning to have people that are saying, no, this cannot be. We are beginning to have people that have realized that we were miseducated. We are beginning to have people that have come to the conclusion that it is now.
The people are evolving now.
Yes. Because this. There is no internet. There is no
Education.
we don't get to see a lot of this. And we need to applaud the revolutionaries of hope. Because in those era where there is no internet, they still that. If you remember I think it was in 1950 in Lagos, there was a meeting that was a conference where we do to boost trade between African nations. And the people I don't believe it, they concluded that they're going to increase intra trade between Africa nations.
Now let's take what you said now. So from what you are saying, when they held the meetings back then in the 1950s, looking for ways of how to actually improve intra-trade within the regions or within the countries in Africa, you're actually talking about regional integration.
So, there's no too much of, we operate, Nigeria, for example, we operate Western Union, a bit notes, Western region, Eastern region, Northern region, Southern region, whereby every region has a leader. And most developed region. In fact, most of the development we have in Nigeria today is the development that happens during the Western, the regional governments, not the roads that are seen in Nigeria today, and roads that were constructed during regional. That's all. So now, we need internet. The dance of trade.
Okay. Trade.
We need internet. The dance of trade. The dance of infrastructure. Can you imagine that as big as Africa is, with a lot of scientists, engineers, and other professions, if you want to consult road, we need to protect.
It's not supposed to be so. Well, we have Africans who are terrible fallacies
Of our education. Actually, you have professors.
on Africa.
It's only in the Africas that you have professors that have a lot of professors that have done that. In Africa, you have generals that are not going to war. See, it's only after you have these people who are not what. Oh, you see, let's speak English. We big grammar. Yes, and her body see goes in the talk.
Triple B, I've actually said a lot today. My viewers, as you all know, you get to see that he has actually explained to us, giving us the impartation of colonialism in Africa. Not only giving us the impartation of colonialism in Africa and how it has affected our mentality, he also gave us ways of how we can have a total breakthrough over these problems that we are having in this present day society.
And one of the things is that we need leaders. See, we are building enough an Africa that will be beyond recognition to know if care is not taken. Look at the way we are borrowing money in Africa. In fact, time will come. Some European countries or maybe China will come to Africa and say, you are owing us too much.
They want to use the whole country for collateral.
African countries will soon be used as collateral. At Nigeria.
Super.
The crude oil we have now, I don't know how to put it, but the fact is that we already collected loan and we are using crude oil to pay for the next maybe 50 years.
Crude oil that has not even been extracted.
Yes. Has been used as collateral. So now it's come that the Chinese government will come to Africa and say, no, taking off.
Mr. Benson, it was actually nice hearing from you today. As we all know, you get to see that it has actually affected us, not only positively, but also negatively. Now, he has given us ways of how we can actually break through. First of all, we should have what? Regional integration. And aside regional integration, we should adopt the means of trying as much as possible to do what? To have a trade within ourselves in Africa. And with that, Africa is not only going to be developed, Africa is going to be blessed, Africa is going to be productive, Africa is going to be fruitful. And against all odds, Africa is going to unite as well. God bless Africa. God bless Nigeria.
We need Africa for Africa. That is all we need. Africa
for Africa. So my people, listen to this word. We need what? Africa for Africans. God bless you.
Thank you.